What's going on, Dolph fans? It is your boy Dillon, and I'm making this video because there was some news today about Stephen Ross donating some money. I mean, really, it was him putting money into his own organization, Rise, that is, and it's for, obviously, racial equality, etc., which is cool, but there's news about that, and then there's an article that I wanted to read regarding that because it touches on some points that I've been making for quite a while that I think are really important, and it gets into some things that I've been saying. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Actually, excuse me, right before I do though, just as a side note, I wanted to also mention that I had told you guys that, obviously, COVID-19 is spreading through the ranks of the NFL. It's spreading through the college ranks, college football. Clemson was one of the colleges that had reported cases. Well, there was a report today that they have 19 additional cases that they just reported, which brings their total to 37 from the 18 that it was at. So they more than doubled, or whatever, or about doubled the number that they had. So, this thing is going to continue, running wildly out of control if we keep going down the path that we're going. But anyway, that was just a quick side note. Let's get to this article. Dolphins owner Stephen Ross, Ross's $13 million pledge to fight racism is great, but it doesn't erase the Trump support. And this is from writer Frank Schwab, from Yahoo Sports. Now, there were definitely several articles, written about this. And in fact, the majority of them are, very complimentary to Ross because he put this in. Let's just note, though, real quick that it's, and we'll get to these details in a minute, but it's $13 million over 4 years, which means $3.25 million a year. I mean, that's cool, but that's not going to do anything. One, it's a fraction. That's like chump change for him. So he could totally donate a ton more money, especially considering all he did was put it in his own organization, which he will get tax credits for. He will get tax breaks for because it's, philanthropic type of organization, right? And so he could have put more money, but he chose 13 million, and it's only 3.25 million a year. So that's not very much. And then additionally, which gets to the heart of this article, when you take into consideration then who he supports for the people who run the country and for who, make the policies, etc., well, it completely negates that. So let's hear what Frank Schwab has to say. Miami Dolphins owner Stephen Ross is pledging $13 million to fighting racism through his Rise Foundation, which is a lot of money to an important cause. But it is also a reminder of how then Dolphins receiver Kenny Stills pointed out that Ross's public stance on racial justice doesn't mesh with how he held a $250,000 a plate fundraiser for President Donald Trump last year. Stills made those comments last year and was traded shortly after. And he's not even giving the full details, which I have before, about how he made those very mundane remarks, but also very accurate remarks about how his support for Donald Trump does not match with the mission statement of Rise and wanting to fight, racism in this country, considering Donald Trump is a giant fucking racist. So, it's just accurate. And because of that, the organization, not only did they trade him, but before that, Brian Flores and company thought it was a good idea to, try and troll him and, intimidate him and shit like that prior to then getting rid of him. I mean, it's just disgusting. Anyway, Ross has given $30 million total to Rise, the Ross Initiative in Sports for Equality, according to the Associated Press. But, like Jacksonville Jaguars owner Shad Khan speaking out about racism despite defending Trump's economic policies, Ross's relationship with the president isn't conveniently forgotten. It is for a lot of people, but certainly not for me, and not on this channel, and part of why I decided to make this video, because nobody else talks about this that I've seen. And it's super important, and it's definitely super relevant. Also, again, I mean, 13 million over the next 4, he's had this organization for however long, and he's put 30 million in total. Like, I mean, it's not that much. If he really, that's the thing, right? Like, he can get off, and guys like him can get off and say that they're not racist because they have, in his case, this organization that is supposedly there to help fight systemic racism. But what has it accomplished? Especially when, again, you support the people who actually make the decisions on the policies, and those people have extremely racist policies. Okay, well, let's continue on. Stephen Ross trying to play both sides again? ? On Friday, Stills retweeted a message from journalist Jemele Hill about Ross, which pointed out his hypocrisy, right? Because Cameron Wolfe tweeted out the news, right, that Stephen Ross donated 13 million to his Rise organization, as did many people. Cameron Wolfe wasn't the only one, but a bunch of people did. Jemele Hill retweeted him, right? He notes the 13 million, the 30 million since 2015. So, I mean, that's a good amount of money, but it hasn't done anything. And then Ross said, now more than ever, this is a quote from Ross, now more than ever, our mission and the need for this work is clear. Really? Is that the case? Well, Jemele Hill retweeted Cameron Wolfe and all of that, saying Stephen Ross held a $250,000 per plate fundraiser for Donald Trump, thus supporting the same systemic racism he's allegedly trying to fight against. Yeah, that's interesting. But, I guess that doesn't matter to a lot of people. So, anyway, continuing on. Last August, before Ross's Dolphins traded Stills, the receiver said to Yahoo Sports he thought he could play both sides, and I thought that he couldn't. Ross defended the fundraiser by saying he had known Trump for 40 years, and while we agree on some issues, we strongly disagree on many others. But that's the thing, though. It doesn't work that way, bro. It doesn't work that way. Okay? You can't just say, oh, well, I don't agree with him on everything, and don't even honestly care to be specific. You just vaguely say, well, I don't agree with him on everything, but despite that, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I do everything to get him in and become the head decision maker, so that way, what? I mean, at the end of the day, it's super obvious, right? He doesn't actually give a shit about the average person. He doesn't care about the fans. He wants the stadium to open too. They've been having like movies and shit there, which is ridiculous, okay? And, so he doesn't care about the players. He doesn't care about any of that shit. He doesn't care about people of color. No, what he cares about is his money. He cares about, being in that race to be the first trillionaire to ever exist, right? Because he is a multi-billionaire. This dude has more money than anyone in generations of his family could spend in their lifetimes. And it's not enough. It's not enough. He needs more and more and more. And so that $13 million, it's lip service. It's just some superficial thing that he can point to and be like, see, look, I, have this organization that I put money into. Not very much, especially when you compare it to my overall wealth. But, I put a little bit of my pocket change into this organization that I created that I actually get tax breaks for. Because it's charitable donations, etc., etc. And, I support the guy who actually makes the policies that completely negate the whole point of this organization that I have, because I don't really give a shit. Anyway, Ross has a lot of money, and presumably his Rise Foundation is doing some good things with it, but it's hard to take his comments about fighting racism seriously when he supports Trump, whose presidency has been filled with moments that have been widely criticized for being harmful to minorities. Stills, who started kneeling during the national anthem to bring attention to racial justice when Colin Kaepernick led the movement, had the courage to call out his boss then. A month later, he was being sent to the Houston Texans. Yeah, see, just... to me and to rational people, that's just not right. Ross's words on racism don't match all of his actions. If you didn't know that Ross raised millions for Trump at the fundraiser at his home in the Hamptons last summer, his words against racism seem positive. Growing up in Detroit, I saw firsthand what racism did to tear apart our community, destroyed lives, and further inequality, Ross said in a statement via the AP. I started Rise based on the belief that our nation must address the scourge of racism directly to achieve true unity. More than ever, our mission and the need for this work is clear. But addressing the scourge of racism should be more than throwing money at his foundation. Like Khan, Ross has to decide if maximizing his real estate business is worth political decisions that go against his comments about fighting racism. And that's really what it is. Because you think Ross wasn't a beneficiary of those immense tax breaks? You think that he's not benefiting in some way, shape, or form, or people that he knows, friends of his, are benefiting from, these corporate bailouts right now that are happening still during this pandemic while the average person is struggling to even put food on the table? No, of course not. He's raking in, and look, since the pandemic started in this country, the billionaires in this country have gotten more than $600 billion richer. And he's one of those. That's what he cares about. And it's super obvious to see, but there are a lot of people out there still lying to themselves and saying, oh, you know what? But he has a black head coach and a black GM, so he couldn't be racist. No, he has a black coach and a black GM, and he's got Rise. So there you go. He couldn't be racist. It doesn't matter that the other actions that he takes behind the scenes or what have you have far more weight and far more effect, to the point where all of that stuff is completely negated, and then you just fucking dive headfirst and into disaster and destruction and negativity. And so, okay, Stills was right. Ross can't play both sides on the issue. Ross can support whoever he wants for president. That's his right. But supporting Trump cancels out most of his effort to battle injustice, no matter how much of his fortune he donates, as long as fighting racism is not as important as making some more money in real estate. And that's what it comes down to. At the end of the day, that's definitely 100% what it comes down to. He cares more about his... And look, again, because it can... The amount of money that he puts into Rise or whatever is obviously enough of an alibi for him for a lot of people. So it's a cheap way to fucking launder his image and be like, and to convince people that because he supports the racist with the racist policy that affects millions of people's lives, that's less important than the fact that he puts his pocket change into his own, organization to fight what he says he dislikes in the racism, yet it has absolutely no effect whatsoever, especially considering the fact that Florida, I mean, it's one of the worst states when it comes to the pandemic, but it's also one of the worst states when it comes to police violence against unarmed black men in this country, or, minorities just in general. They are just despicable in the level of disdain and hatred that they have for minority classes in this country or poor people, and the level to which they seek out violence against them. It's horrid. It's despicable. But look, Stephen Ross supports Donald Trump and those kinds of things, and the inflation of his own wealth far more than he does, actually attacking the root causes of the systemic racism. And look, man, and that's why I said, and this will be my last note on it, is that's why I said Brian Flores and Chris Greer, they're fucking sellouts. They're nothing more than just sellouts, because they did that to Kenny Stills as well. They played a hand in that. They blackballed him, or whatever. They traded him, they got rid of him, and then all of that stuff before, simply because he was pointing out the hypocrisy. But cardinal sin, especially since he was on talking about the owner of his own team. But they played a hand in that, and they're just sellouts. They sided with the white male billionaire owner over the player of color whom was being attacked for just the most mundane yet accurate statement ever. So anyway, I think I made it pretty clear which side of that fight I stand on. So, you know, it's up to people, you know, to decide for themselves which side they stand on. And if they want to, you know, how they want to evaluate people like Stephen Ross or, you know, Brian Flores and Chris Greer. Like I said, I think Stephen Ross is just flat out a racist, and none of the superficial, you know, shit that he does or the shit that he says can compare to, you know, supporting Donald Trump, etc., etc. And, you know, Brian Flores and Chris Greer, well, you know, at the very least, they're just sellouts. You know, I don't know if they hate their own kind. I don't know if they look in the mirror and like hate themselves. I would hope that they feel some kind of guilt over how that, you know, they treated Kenny Stills, but my guess is they don't. And my guess is that Chris Greer is really loving that paycheck he gets as the GM. My guess is that Brian Flores is really loving that paycheck he gets as head coach. And that's pretty enticing in the world we live in. So anyway, with that, I'm going to get up out of here. I hope you guys appreciate my perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Share my channel and videos with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. And of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Fins up.